Deputy Catherine Murphy, co-leader of the Social Democrats, please.
Taoiseach, a question many people around the country are asking at the moment is who's running this country? Is it your government or is it the permanent government? We know the Secretary-General for the Department of Health, Robert Watt, is in a rarefied position, not least because his pay grade is above yours. But does that mean that he can snub his nose at attending Oireachtas committees and decline to be held accountable for decisions he takes? The same Secretary-General thinks so little of the Oireachtas Committee on Finance that he didn't even bother responding to the request for a meeting tomorrow to discuss the botched appointment of Tony Holohan to Trinity College. There was a significant 20 million sum associated with this proposed secondment, and the Finance Committee are tasked with investigating state spending. So why won't the Secretary-General and indeed the Health Minister appear before that committee? And Taoiseach, how on earth do you expect Dáil committees to have any authority in their functions and convince, for example, people in semi-state sectors or the private people in the private sector to appear before them if civil servants on very high salaries refuse to do so? Who exactly is calling the shots? But it's certainly not your ministers. We learned yesterday in the Examiner that your colleague for Disabilities, Minister Anne Rabbitte, can't even get a meeting with HAC managers in individual CHO areas around the country. When Ms Rabbitte requested those meetings from the managers of the 9 different CHO areas, she was told it was not operationally feasible. She was contacted not just by the individual managers, but by the National Director of Community Operations, who essentially told the Minister to get back in her box. We know disability services are at a crisis, and the High Court has ruled very recently that the HSE assessment of needs for children is illegal, and the Minister can't get a 40-minute meeting once a month with HSE managers. Now, do ministers in your government have the authority over the departments that they oversee? Minister Rabbitte, to her credit, was trying to get answers to get to the root of what's causing the rot in the disability sector. We know that different CHO areas perform differently. There's a variety of reasons for that, but some perform way better than others. So it is perfectly legitimate for the Minister to seek those individual meetings. My question, Taoiseach, is who is running the country? Your government or the permanent government? Are you happy that senior civil servants are snubbing invitations to Oireachtas committees? And what are you going to do about the civil servants refusing to meet your ministry? Do elections matter? Does democracy matter? Like, who is running this country? It is really frustrating a lot of people at the moment what is happening.
Thank you, Deputy. Taoiseach, please.
First of all, we have democracy, and it's the directly elected members of this House that pass legislation and pass the fundamental laws of the House, the basic laws that we enact on an annual sessional basis. And the power lies in this House in terms of legislation and in terms of raising issues on a time basis. Also in terms of any funding initiatives and so on, it's the elected government of the day has to sanction, as does the Oireachtas here, the estimates of various departments, and any individual proposals and so on have to go through the various procedures that are laid down, and there's no escaping that in the end of the day. And in respect of Oireachtas committees, my understanding is the Minister has not refused and has made this clear in communications with the Chair of the Finance Committee. But what the Minister has said is that there's an external review that has been commissioned. From my perspective, it would seem logical that would allow the external review conclude in a matter of weeks, which would then feed into any consideration by any Oireachtas committee, although I think there's a number of Oireachtas committees, there's certainly 2 Oireachtas committees that indicated interest now. I think that's something we need to resolve. I don't actually believe that someone articulated yesterday that the same people go before 3 committees, for example, finance, health and potentially public accounts. There are issues here that need to be dealt with and addressed, certainly. From a health research perspective, from the secondment of the Chief Medical Officer, that proposal, which didn't go ahead in the end, And I've said it repeatedly, it's regrettable that the entire situation happened in the manner that it did. There was some merit in the idea of building up capacity and pandemic preparedness into the future, learning lessons from our experience over the last 2 years in relation to the pandemic, which was a once in a century event. And as a country, we did relatively well compared to other countries in terms of dealing with that pandemic and with the crisis, and all the people involved in that, in the public health arena and elsewhere, deserve credit for that. But there has to be, due process and procedure in relation to this. My view, I think the sensible way to proceed is to allow the external review conclude. It's not going to be too long. And then that would, no, it's a matter for the House ultimately. I'm not dictating on this. It's then a matter for the committees as well to proceed with it. But I think we'd have a more comprehensive, informed, perhaps position in relation to it. But the Minister has made it clear to me that he has no issue in coming before a committee, but he believes there's a sequencing that would make sense.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Deputy.
Was a long 3 minutes, Taoiseach. There was 20 million involved here. It's perfectly legitimate for the Finance Committee to interrogate that. The committees are committees of this House, not the committees of government. And if there's an external review, that is an issue for government or for the department. Can I just say that, like a Sláinte Care, for example, an all-party approach, when the head of HSE and the Secretary-General met with the Health Committee recently in relation to Sláinte Care, it was very clear they didn't want to implement Sláinte Care in full. So the permanent government were making that decision. Permanent government are telling PAC, we can't have a report, we can't discuss the cost of the National Children's Hospital. We keep on being told that there's lessons being learned, yet we don't learn lessons. What about the Minister who has responsibility for disability services being refused access to the people who are on the front line on the operational side? I know, and everyone else in this House knows that there's a very significant problem with disability services. It is absolutely improper to refuse the Minister access to the staff that can interrogate that and understand what's going on so as it can be resolved.
Thank you, Deputy Murphy. Taoiseach.
First of all, I want to pay tribute to Minister Anne Rabbitte. I didn't get a chance in my first 3 minutes to deal with that, for her commitment and ongoing work in relation to disability issues. And indeed, I work with the Minister, and there will be, in my view, there has to be a review of progressing disability. And I will be meeting with the Minister and the CEO of the HSE in relation to that in a while to deal more comprehensively with disability services, because progressing disability is either overtly or inadvertently taking some resources from special schools, for example, which I don't think is an acceptable way to go. I've had this view for a long time. Progressing disability is to be fair to the HSE, has been progressing for quite a number of years under successive governments. And it is important that we evaluate that, but also work to make sure we don't dilute existing resources in existing locations as that policy has been rolled out. And that's a particular concern of Minister Rabbitte. She has met, she holds monthly meetings with all 9 HSE CHO disability managers in attendance alongside their HSE headquarters management team and so forth. But nonetheless, the Minister should always be in a position to meet any team in any location.
Thank you, Taoiseach. Time is up.
Across the country. And again, in relation to more broader matters, it's important to point out that issue that you relate to in terms of the gun was paused.